Hi, this is Rick for EDU Mobile, and today we're going to talk about design patterns in iOS development. First of all, we'll talk about Model View Controller, because Model View Controller is the most important overarching design pattern that we use in iOS development. iOS is built around Model View Controller, and so when we develop new code for iOS, we should keep the Model View Controller design pattern in mind. So what is the Model View Controller design pattern? Well, MVC, as we call it, the idea behind it is to separate the data in our application from the presentation. The data is represented by classes that we term the model. The presentation is represented by the view classes, and the controller is the guy that handles the communication between the model and the view. So this is a simplistic picture of Model View Controller. We can see that the controller instantiates both the model and the view. Now, the controller could be a single class, it could be a group of classes, and the same is true for both the model and the view. The model and the view, though, and this is very important, the paramount rule of Model View Controller is that the model and the view never directly communicate. They communicate through the controller. So the controller is in charge. Since the controller has the control of both the view and the model, and it instantiates both the view and the model, it can always communicate with both of them and tell them what to do. But communication from the view or the model to the controller is limited. The model nearly always communicates with the controller, talks to the controller through delegation. But the view is even more limited than that. The view generally uses another design pattern that we call target action. Controllers in an application communicate to each other either directly, in the case of one controller instantiating another controller, and down the line, that first controller will directly communicate with the second controller, or through delegation, in the case of a subsidiary controller communicating back with a master controller. That's nearly always done through delegation. So that kind of communication between controllers is going to depend on their relationship. Who instantiates who, in other words. So let's talk about this target action mechanism, or design pattern of target action between the view and the controller. The idea is that some action occurs on the view. This could be a button press, or somebody moving a slider, or any kind of action method, or any kind of action that the user initiates. The view will hook into a method of the controller to handle that action. And this is called the action method. The controller class is the target. The method is the action. And this is why we call this target action. The view control has a target, the controller, and an action, the method that's going to handle the control. Any UI control bound to an action method and getting user input is therefore called an active control. So things like buttons that we must press are always going to be active controls. But things like labels that just display information, those are usually passive controls. In fact, they're always passive controls. The controller is going to directly place the information into the label. There is no action required by the user to interact with that, and so that's a passive control. So this is a very simplistic picture, again, of Model View Controller. Again, our controller and the view is what we want to talk about. The controller can directly tell the view what to do, but this target action method, this target action design pattern mechanism is responsible for taking any actions on the view initiated by the user, and then finding the target, which is the controller, and then executing the method, which is called the action. Delegation we've already covered. We've talked about protocols and delegation. The idea here is that the model defines a protocol, and the controller then becomes the model's delegate. And the methods of the model's protocol are defined and executed by the controller. Okay, so we've seen this before when we've talked about just general Objective-C programming design patterns. Delegation is used for the model to communicate to the controller. Now, remember that the delegate knows who the model is, but the model doesn't know what the identity of the delegate class is. And this is exactly the situation we have. We have the delegate, the controller, instantiating the model. So the controller is talking to the model and tells the model to do something. While the model's doing something, some event occurs within the model that the controller needs to be aware of, so the model sends a delegate method out to its delegate, and then the controller handles that method. So this is the normal way for models to talk back to their controllers. Again, we have this picture, and now we've added the dotted line representing delegation through a protocol from the model back to the controller. Now, one final thing that needs to be stressed about this picture of model view controller is this. There is no direct communication at all between the model and the view. All model view interaction has to go through the controller. This separation is the first most important rule of the model view controller design pattern. Organizing your application in this way makes it easier to maintain. It also, since iOS is built in this model view controller kind of way and builds on delegation and target action, organizing your application in this way only makes sense because we're using existing patterns in iOS and really extending the system by adding our application classes to it. Thank you very much.